Okay, so we're going to move on and we're into part 2 of the day. And delighted to have Professor Gilly Salmon here with us. She's been with us for a few days now and she'll be with us again tomorrow. She's working with us on another project called Cascade to help us with teaching and learning strategy for ATU. So without further ado, I'll begin just to introduce Gilly. Professor Gilly Salmon has been a learning innovator for more than 30 years and is one of the world's leading thinkers in digital and blended learning. So she researches and publishes widely in the themes of innovation and change in higher education and the exploitation of new technologies and all kinds of service of learning. So previously she was Professor of Innovation and Transformation at the University of Liverpool, Management School and Pro-Vice Chancellor of Education Innovation at the University of Western Australia, also Pro-Vice Chancellor of Learning Transformation at Swinburne University of Technology, Melbourne, Australia, and before that, Executive Director and Professor of Learning Futures in the Australian Digital Futures Institute. And I could go on with more. So just to conclude, after 30 years in the university sector in the UK and Australia, Professor in Education Futures, she is now working as a consultant in this area of digital transformation in teaching and learning. So delighted to have you here with us, Gilly. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karina. Okay, so we've had quite a busy morning with so many things going on that I'm going to try and pull it together now to what each one of you can do. And I'm going to try and ask you as I go through to try and pick something that you're committed to start doing tomorrow, all right, well, Monday, all right, or soon, anyway, something that you can do or something that you can do with a colleague, because it is the ripples on the pond, really. It's probably a bit of a mixed metaphor that actually, you know, we're somewhere around here now and we need to actually start scaling up and sustaining what we do to impact on the future. So that's my challenge for you. And we've got an hour for you to pick your future from this lot. So my question is really to each of you first. There's this kind of mantra and you'll see it when you speak to other people about sort of futuring and future stuff. It's sure it's about technology, but it could be about all sorts of other things. And you see, even if you speak to your kids, to your parents, your grandparents, in my case, grandchildren, and some people just say, oh, I wonder what on earth happened, you know. I don't know, you know, it's sort of passing us by, it's overtaken us, the robots come in, etc. There's other people who know what's going on in the external environment, and they're saying, well, I'm going to watch and see what happens. Actually, they're the ones that annoy me the most, because and then there's others that genuinely realise that there are a whole range of preferred and viable futures. It's true that none of them, if you think of it in scenario terms, will be exactly the way it goes. But I can tell you for sure that unless you've got some vision of your preferred future and you check that it's even got an inkling of viability, then you will be dissatisfied. So you need to start, before you do all of these other wonderful things, have some idea of what that might look like. Because otherwise the road that you travel, so I don't know, who are you? I'm not going to ask you to respond to me on this, but it is just a question as you begin of who you really are and what you're getting out of being here, actually, and being involved with your colleagues. All of you who are here really do want to create the future, I know, but it is overwhelming. So I'm going to try and get you to think about what you can actually do. I'm going to try and sort of wipe the window back. You know, when you open the curtains in the morning, think, okay, it's raining. Oh, that bit's just a smear on the window. So think of it in that way, that you're going to see it actually get a little bit of a clearer vision, an actionable vision too. So I think coming out of post-COVID, I was lucky that I was actually able to do a little bit of research. It includes about 30 different universities about what might happen next. And it's quite interesting now to find out where you think you're at, sort of, what are we, 3 years in before it hit us, since it hit us. So there are many people that think, okay, let's get back to normal. You may have been innovating, and certainly in ATU you were. You were already innovating, you were shifting towards blend, I know that. And in some ways, the pandemic didn't do any favours of those who were using good research and good ways of doing things, because we had to just respond by emergency teaching. So you might want to revert. You might want to say, okay, draw a line under the last 3 years and revert to where we were. And it is a valid point of view that you're then going to build on what's strong, what's culturally appropriate, strong for you. There are others that think, okay, well, I'm going to have to adapt a bit. The external environment is changing. Look at the sort of remote working. Student expectations are changing. You know, the technology is moving in, and we're getting tsunamis coming our way. Well, we've got to take decisions on what we do, for example, about AI, about the metaverse. We need to take decisions on that. So we're thinking I can make some adaptation to my learning and teaching or to my assessment. There are others still who are talking about evolving. Think of, think Darwin. You can be Darwin, all right. And think about, you know that the fittest are going to survive. So you need to get some idea of what would be a fit for purpose university for the future, or for your discipline, or for your area, and start to think about, well, do I need a longer tail or bigger ears in order to make that kind of happen? Yeah? Okay, so think Darwin. So that's a little bit different from just making some adaptations. It's probably a bit more radical, and it's also, you know, that not everyone is going to make it. Okay, so you need to be one of the ones that does survive in this. And what adaptation do you need to make? And then the word transform, it's been used already. It's in the tutor project. It's in other transform. Transform is very radical, you know. It means actually stopping doing a lot of things and doing some things quite differently. You're actually putting that clay together. On Sunday, one of my daughters had given me a Christmas present, which was for the first time working with a potter's wheel. It took me quite a few goes to get a little cup that looked sort of cup-shaped. And she just saying, don't worry, just throw it down again and do it again. And she actually ended up holding my fingers so that it didn't fly off, but the person who was teaching me. But that's transforming, it's trying and working out what a real transformation would mean. And it does mean saying, okay, that's in the past, we're going to let it go. And we're actually going to use our resources in a new way. All right? Are you thinking about which of these you would like ATU to have? So I'm going to ask you to choose now, right now, which one of these would be your preferred and viable pathway. So this is BVOX. Everyone online, probably the easiest way for you to do is just to hold your scanner up and it will take you straight there. Or those of you who are here, you can put your Vivox app or in your browser and then put that ID in, okay? When I think most of you are in, I will move to putting the questions up. How are you doing? You getting there? Yeah? Yeah? Anybody in? Okay. Okay. So you're getting that question now? Yeah? Am I doing it wrong? Press enter. Getting it now? So I'm just asking you which you think. ATU, teaching, learning and assessment, should now revert, adapt, evolve or transform. You can only choose one, sorry. Have you got the questions on the app now?
We have. Let's go back and just delete any results that you may have had.
I think you did that actually.
Okay, and we'll just go back. So we have to press delete first.
Blue.
And now we'll press enter. And now that.
Okay. Thank you, Barrel. He was holding my hand on the potter's wheel there. Did you see that? Okay. Everyone online, if you can. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. We'll take the higher education sector. That will be fine. Yes. My apologies. Yeah. I'm still getting them coming in. You can see the little thing up the top there. Okay, shall I press enter again now?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, Karina, no one is going to revert, okay? You can breathe. Okay, it's pretty strong on survival here and evolving, but 42% want to transform. So get your clay out, people, and start throwing it around. Okay, so this is obviously ATU and others from the sector, as our colleague has pointed out. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to keep going with the presentation now. Thank you very much. So, I've worked with learning design for a very long time now, and it has evolved during about 2.5 decades. So I'm going to tell you very much about the story of how it's evolved and where it's going now. But I think this whole issue of sustainability, I mean, when I started, I invented a methodology called Carpe Diem Learning Design, which just takes one day, if you get all the right people there, to go from a standing start to an action plan for a new module or program or project. And nobody talked about student experience. And we're almost moving beyond that now. So that has definitely happened in that time. And this idea of design once and deploy many times, this incredible pressure we all feel with workload. You must not do things that add to your workload. You must do things that are viable. You might need to shift your time, but you know, to different points in the course or your work, but you must not add time. So the idea is that if you design once, and with only minor changes, what you design can be deployed with students and delivered to students successfully many, many times. So that's what I mean from that form of sustainability. And then the teaching, the modes of learning, people are spending so much time working out, should it be online? What is it, blend? Is it hybrid? Is it this? Is it that? We need, unfortunately, I've just finished a project looking at all the pros and cons of that, which I'll share with you. Quite early on in your design, take a decision on what's right for your students and then do the design accordingly. And then you've got future tech. Of course, we've got to accommodate AI and the metaverse, which has dropped off of our conversations possibly for a few months, but will come back, and all the other things that are still coming on. Not everything will take off, but my suggestion is you get your strong design, your strong student-centered design, and then add in some small-scale experiments with new technology. That's a way to make it sustainable. And of course, we've got the environment, which is what people normally think about sustainability. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. However, I think you really seriously need to think about university buildings. There's been some reports out. By the way, I've put a lot of my references all in at the end of this, which you're welcome to have to follow up the ones you're most interested in. But most of the resources that buildings use up are in the maintenance and the use of the buildings. It's not in the original building. So if you've got any influence, either ATU or anywhere else, you need to reduce the amount of physical buildings that there are, not increase them. Okay, they might have been named for some dignitary or other. Well, they've had their benefit of that now. Try and name in your new virtual learning environment after them. I think that's going to be more sustainable than another lecture theatre. So, and if anything is built or refurbished, make sure that it's ready for the future. In other words, hybrid working, flat spaces, flexibility, that sort of thing. And then there's this whole issue of what really makes courses sustainable is actually getting stakeholders into the design right at the beginning. Not checking out at the end that your employees are okay with this. I have not been terribly successful at getting students involved in the whole of my learning design process, but in particular parts where they've got active things to do. But I certainly do involve colleagues. We, as far as possible, we have people from across the university, scientists with artists, for example, works particularly well. So I'll say a bit more about that later. So I'm going to actually go through, focus on design, but I actually would like you to think about whether one of these is your thing and you'd like to know a little bit more about for your commitment as you go forward. So Neil put up what looked like a double diamond this morning. I'm using it in the traditional design way. Some of you, if you're in engineering or design or the arts, will use this anyway. And it is the idea that you really do need to diverge before you converge on the changes that you're going to make. And nearly all of us forget to do that. You know, we're rushing in, we want to get things done, but you do really need it. You know, okay, it's disruptive, but you need disruption in order to very much widen the scope. And it was the origin of the old De Bono stuff of brainstorming and all that. And a lot of that we've forgot in the rush to get things done. But I promise you, if you do your divergence first, and I'll show you some ways that I do it, your convergence will come out of something much more survivable, much more transformable than if you jump straight into the middle of it and then diverge again to work out ways of achieving it and then ultimately have your goal. But the spirit of doing it is always to have the goal in mind. So you do also need ways of working out what they are. And so it looks something like this. So I wrote a blog about it about a year ago down there. I'm trying to give you links. So if you're interested in this, you've got some more. And this is, I think, how it works if you're creating a future for students through designing a module or a program. So you must start with the end in mind. You know, with something like that, you no doubt have got all sorts of paperwork and all sorts of things to do. You don't want to do that too soon and not too late either, but create a collaborative vision that goes into that. Seek to agree some of principles, keep them loose, keep them light, keep them open, and then collaborate to explore the options to design on those principles. And you can then start taking some decisions on what you're going to not do as well as what you are going to do. I don't know whether here in Ireland you have one of these programs where some celebrity goes into people's houses and drags everything out of the house and puts it all in a warehouse and then forces them to get rid of 50% of it, tarts up the house by painting it and then puts them all back. That's what you've got to do with your ideas at this point, okay? Then try out some prototypes. Any of you involved in, you know, product design, movie design, anything like that, you'll know for sure there's always a prototype, there's always a tester. And I'll show you the sort of thing you can do for that. And I think that's often forgotten when we're trying to create sustainable futures. So always have a small scale prototype where you don't need loads of money for it. You're not committing everyone, you try things out. And then build a storyboard. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on storyboards today because that's important. And then diverge, share and agree, keep going back to your vision. And then an action plan. Everyone needs to be committed, but by then, hopefully, you can see some wonderful examples this morning of that, where there were teams working together, where people doing different bits and acknowledging other people. So this is the methodology where I've built that in. I'm going to take you through it a bit more, but if you like the basic idea of it, it has been tried and tested. I did over 200 during the pandemic online. We digitalized everything, and I've lost count of the ones that I did physically before that. But it's on my website. It's called Carpe Diem, Seize the Day. This is what it kind of looks like, of course, if you're doing it. You can see there's 6 stages to it. I'm going to spend a little bit time on the first 2 today, 1 and 2. But first, I don't need to spend too much time on this because you've heard some from Neil and it's, you know, what you know. But especially those of you who want to transform or those of you who are keen to evolve for survival, you do need to look at the mega drivers for change. I've put all the reports, the up-to-date reports in the back. And it's not just about AI, it's also about demographic shifts. Lifelong learning is as much about babies born today, maybe half of them will live to over 100. You know, they're not going to retire at 60, and the world's going to move all that time. The impact of economies and societies, huge challenges for governance and balance of power and so on, and climate change too, saving the planet. It's not last but not least, but it's not the only game in town. And in a way, learning impacts on all of this. I mean, we are creating the people who are going to solve these things, are going to have to live with this. Yeah. I'll tell you a little story about during the pandemic. My 2 granddaughters were aged 7 and 10. The 7-year-old, some sort of throwback has occurred and she looks exactly like me. She's got the same colouring, same colour eyes and so on. And she's insisting on growing her hair down to her bottom. So she's got wavy blonde hair that sort of floats around like this all the time. And when the pandemic started, They were sent home from school. Both of her parents are working professionals. There was another child in the house as well, and they were pulling their hair out. So I said, I will have them on Zoom for 1 hour a day. I taught the little one to read that way. It was possible. But with Sophia, who's the one who looks exactly like me, I mean, she was turning up each day on Zoom with sparkly things on her head. So I asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she said she was going to be a princess. Oh dear. Okay. So I ignored the curriculum that the school had sent me. Sorry. And I decided I was going to see if I could turn her into a scientist. So I did the periodic table with her. I did things like how to ask good questions, research methodology. Anyway, she really got into all of this. And I'm very happy to report that she's now close to going to secondary school, and she's going to be a paleontologist, not a princess. So you've got to have this kind of vision right at the start to lead people down the right kind of pathways. So if you see a paleontologist digging on the TV or something with blonde hair down to her knees, it's my granddaughter. And then the future fundamental for students, again, you've heard some of this helpfully from Neil this morning. There's loads of people kind of saying, it's not just the content, it's not just what's in there, but of course they do need that basic knowledge too. But these are the ones that I work on. You can work out yours before you do your storyboard, so you've got a vision of what needs to go along with your learning outcomes, with your key threshold concepts for your programs. And emotional intelligence, leadership is in there. They're going to have to be very self-assertive future students, and of course the creativity. But I think futures and systems thinking is just as important. So I'm going to leave that behind now and do a bit of systems thinking myself. So I teach systems thinking to leadership, and it amazes me how few of them understand the basic systems that go to make up our complex world. And the fact that they are concentric circles, that what's going on in our planet on the whole will influence what happens in a country, what happens to the employment inside it, what happens to the individual sectors, what happens to education in that. And you've got little influence the other way. And so it can feel overwhelming, and you can be one of those people who say, well, at best, I'm going to watch what happens. But there are ways of getting yourself out of this. One of the ways is look at the discipline that you're teaching, because they're all changing. I work a lot with health people. I'm going to give you one example if we get time at the end on that. Or, whatever you're doing, maths, science, arts, health, language, all of those are changing in the world. And if you look at what's happening there, then it does give you really strong clues of the way your teaching might evolve. And then the university can have drivers. I mean, to give ATU as an example, there's all sorts of things going on to push towards new visions, push towards new strategies, and fortunately, to put the organisational structure and the resources in place to do it. Now, bear in mind, if you get a strong vision, that's what drives resources. Okay, so people going around saying, well, it'd be all right if we had more time, it'd be all right if we had more money. You need to know where you're going. Remember your preferred and viable future in order, and then you can put your hand up and say, give me time, give me money to do it. And then there's your program that you're actually teaching. And that's where you are, that black dot there, okay? And you can make a difference, okay? But be aware of everything that's going on around you. So I'm absolutely convinced if each one of you go away with something today, we're going to see this kind of breakthrough happen And if we met again even next year or the year after, you would be able to say, yeah, I picked that and this is what's happened. Just to say, if you don't know what to pick for your preferred and viable future, the 2023 EDUCAUL's Horizon Report, there's been Horizon reports going back, I can't remember, been involved in the committee for it at least 20 years, I think it might be 25. And they're run on a kind of a Delphi thing. So people around the world make contributions. But this one, which has just been published, is all open, it's all free, and you can get these slides. And thanks, we have actually got a link on this image. And it's not just what they think is coming up, because it's a bit bland and fairly obvious in the technology side, but there's some really nice essays and examples in there as well. So I do recommend you have a look at that for more inspiration. And then really, I think this is the only time I want you to look back and see what transformational teaching and learning concepts that you have that are going to be relevant to your discipline or your profession. So no, you do not have to let go of what's good. You just got to let go of some stuff, okay, rather than just add into it. So I'm going to show you some of mine, and you may have others. I mean, most of my pedagogical work now goes back to the early 90s with the Open University Business School, where I did the first learning and teaching with technology strategy a long time ago. And then I was lucky. I mean, during the first part of this century, we actually got money for research and teaching. That was amazing. So we've got a lot of evidence. I think I was the first professor of e-learning at that time, which I was appointed professor of e-learning in 2004. And people were saying, what is that? But there'll be things from your own background, your own career, that you just need to look back, see what's seminal, see what has sustained, see what has survived, that you can now use for our new environments. And you can be pretty sure if you can use them in your design, then they're going to carry you forward. And at least you'll know you're not inventing something that happened during the pandemic. But you do need to apply it clearly to your context. So this is the key thing with models and evidence. You need them to be able to work out how to do that. It's really another talk from me. Of how to apply models to a context, which I'll do some other time if you want it. But I've put some references in the back. There's one particular book that's particularly helpful. So invest in yourselves, what you already know. Have confidence that you do know a lot about learning, teaching and assessment, but adapt or evolve in it for the new environment, for your area, your university, your context, your discipline. All right? Yeah? Everyone's still alive? Yeah. Okay. And then, as I say, you do really need to involve others in this vision right at the beginning. Obviously, your university, other faculty, your school, your program, and your partners. There were some fantastic partners cited in the projects this morning. And then your sector, your profession, and digital futures, what's happening in that, and employers. Talk to students, recent graduates, alumni, and then make sure that whatever you do, there's a wild card, all right? It might be a critical friend, it might be a futurist, it might be somebody from a different faculty, and moonshots, really just something that's truly ambitious. We're now calling them juice shots. Do you know why? No. JUICE is the name of that mission to Jupiter's moons, okay, that set off only a few weeks ago. And It's not going to get there for 8 years, and it's a European collaboration mainly, though it was launched from South America. But I just sat there in absolute amazement. It's kind of doing slingshots, using gravity to get it further out. So, incredible science behind it. But just think what had to happen for those people to have that vision and confidence that will send something out that will start sending pictures back of Europa and places like that out. That's around Jupiter. Could you just have one little juice shot of your own, small one, do you think, that was really ambitious, that was in your preferred and viable future? Something you've always wanted to do, perhaps. I'm not going to tell you what mine is. And then this is what we call radical collaboration. I've given you a couple of references there in case you're interested to know how to do those deeper dives when you're collaborating, rather than sort of just saying, okay, let's all talk about this. And it is a key principle from design thinking. It's used for all these really super big projects. So just, I think that's a key concept as well that we need to take forward, not let it go. So this is how I do it at the very beginning of the Carpe Diem Learning Design. I have an artist in resident. We do it by drawing. We do it by images, okay? So I'm just showing you quickly. I'm going to have to speed up a bit. I'm showing you quickly. This was Norway, sort of Norway shape. And this was a leadership program that we're developing. And their concept was a prototype car. And you can see, the future, they see things very, very differently. And there's a gallery there on my website if you would like to look at more. There's loads of these. This one was the horse racing industry. We were working on an MBA. What's down the left-hand side is this very traditional industry. The green welly boot was representing, you know about this in Ireland, don't you? Horses. Yeah. It was representing everyone from the horse owners, the owners of the race courses and the stables, right down to the stable lads who did the mucking out of the horses. But, it's super, super changing. It's because of betting and because of, some race courses only get used half a dozen times a year, so they're using them for all sorts of other things. And then there's the university down the bottom trying to train people to work in this super complex environment. And what we usually do when we're starting to draw this kind of rich, complex picture is put the student at the heart of it. So we start to move down that path in a deep way towards student-centeredness. They put the horse there, okay? So they wanted the horse there. So the horse is the heart of everything we do, they said. Don't know myself, but there you go. This was a health one. I'm going to say a bit more about a big health project I've been involved in, transformation of moving location-based placements in health to digital. But this was the roller coaster of how the professions in health are changing, and therefore the fact they need a very different education going towards the future mountains. This was a school of law where they had a vision and they wanted to change themselves very, very quickly. And it was based on a project called the 4.0 lawyer, because law is changing massively due to digital. So you can see the sort of thing. Now, the way we do this is done collaboratively. It takes a couple of hours. It's not my drawing. We have an artist in residence with us, but you'll be amazed when people get going how you can get a highly collective vision. Okay, so you get the idea of that. Now then, that's your divergence, but you then have got some sort of collective vision of where you're going. You do need to start to look at quality learning design to meet that vision. And there really are, if you break it down, no matter how you teach, what modes of teaching, there's really 6 main things to think of. And you heard a bit about knowledge and skills this morning and how they needed to be scaffolded. Pacing is super important. And I'm going to show you how you can use it to shift your thinking to a very much more student-centered view. And it is also really important for staff time. No matter what mode you choose, you need to work out how much time needs to be spent on design. If you use Carpe Diem, hopefully only a day. How much time the learning designers will need to build the digital part of that course. Don't forget them. They're at the centre of this. And then how much time staff will need for delivery. And it's different from the way workload is worked out at the moment. So that can be a challenge. And then, of course, the student time as well. I'll come to more of that. Feedback and assessment. You don't want more assessment usually, you want less, but you do want more feedback. And the more you go on the line, the more feedback you need. It doesn't all have to be from you. It can be all sorts of different sorts of feedback. Even quizzes will be good, but obviously move to your peer assessment. And I heard a great research project this morning about e-portfolios as well, which is another way of getting feedback. Now, about element 4 and 5, the way I suggest you do this is think about synchronous activity and asynchronous activity, not campus and online. This will mean that you do a much better design. So nobody's stopping you having meeting labs and site visits and classrooms and lectures if that's what you want to do. But you need to know that all of those could be transferred in line if, God forbid, we get another pandemic or you decide it's better for your students or whatever. And asynchronous gives the thinking, the reflective time, the self-efficacy is built by the asynchronous activity, not by the immediacy. So you need a bit of both in there. And don't forget the independent study. So I'm going to show you how this might fit together in a storyboard in a moment. Some of you will know the 5-stage model. I first researched it in the 1990s with around 2,000 MBA students in the UK Open University. They were the ones that had access at that time. I'll probably never get ethical approval these days because I just did it with the ones who could get on. But we actually, over 2 years and a completely remote students with very, very basic technology, absolutely nothing fancy, looked at what they did to support each other and their own development. And it was built into a model originally to help staff training. That's why you might have done it if you'd done a learning and teaching course. But ultimately, when I started publishing books on it, people picked it up for learning design for students because it helps to take them through each of these stages. And it's pretty bulletproof. As long as you have activities directly addressing each of those things, you will get them to the all-important metacognitive stage, which is stage 5. You will get them collaborating, but you need to make sure there's activity at each of these stages. And then the other thing some of you know is the activities framework. Again, picking up, this is not rocket science, but it was done to help people design activities at each of the 5 stages. But this wasn't a kind of grounded model like the 5-stage model. This was based on cognitive science. I was a cognitive psychologist at the time. So it's purposeful. Everything has to be purposeful. People always say to me, oh, it'll be all right, but I can't get the students to do it. Tell them exactly why they're doing it, how it will help them today, tomorrow, next week with their future career, even if it's a little bit of activity and you watch them flock in. Always align it with assessment. Always make sure every activity has feedback of some sort. Instructions, one message. on the virtual learning environment. Doesn't matter which virtual learning environment it is, but one message with links out to where they make their contributions. Very clear timing. For students, how long it's going to take them in total, how many hours, when you're expecting various outputs. The outputs will be linked to the purposefulness, of course, and what the calendar time is, when it starts and finishes. So you've got really clear timing in there. A spark to start the activity and the dialogue. Okay, not everything you know about it, but something to interest them. Can be a little video, it can be a saying, it can be some sort of activity. And then this is quite important. If you don't remember anything else about activities and you've had bad experiences of trying to get students to work together asynchronously, everyone makes an individual contribution before you get the cooperative and collaborative work going. It means that you don't have to keep going on begging them to take part. You'll tell them what you expect them to do by when, output, what you expect them to do together by when, output, and that's what they get the feedback on. But always there's a teacher input at the end when they've done the work. So that's the utilities framework. There's stacks more about it on my website and a lot on my YouTube channel as well, which I put up there, including, they've been quite popular in Ireland and there's people talking about how they've used it. So that's the utilities framework. This is the research project just finished. It's looking at location-based learning with some enhancements, blended, which tends to mean some synchronous, some asynchronous, whether it's on location and online, hybrid, including high flex, which means that everyone's together online, and fully digital. Now, each one of these has pros and cons. So I'm not going to go through all of this now, but you can have a look at it with the benefits. Whether I think it's sustainable, I think active blended learning is sustainable. I'm not so sure about a lot of hybrid because people are having to build better buildings for it. Hybrid rooms plus digital conferencing. Entirely digital learning will tend to be highly sustainable if you can get the numbers. And the familiar campus but enhanced, it is sustainable as long as you use existing resources and it's reasonably future-proofed. So that's a little bit of a discussion for you, perhaps, when you're talking about designing courses. Now, I'm going to show you what a storyboard looks like and how to do it. Got about 10 minutes. You put up the length of time you've got for the course and you make sure you've got your vision, your learning outcomes, your threshold concepts ready before you start to design. And the stage 1 to 5 is the 5-stage model. And then you do put a scaffold of the topics up. This is not everything that's in your course document. This is 1 or 2 words on a post-it that you can later move around to make sure that you've got the absolute essentials there. And then you think about these activities that you're going to put in there, which may well be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. And then you think about where your feedback might come and where you're going to put other forms of feedback in, either from you. You'll see in an activity, there's built-in feedback anyway, so that helps. And then any synchronous activity you've got. So it's really a student-centered way. You don't start off by saying, well, our lectures are going to be here, workshops are going to be here, and sometime down the bottom you work out what the students are going to do. You start off with what the students do. And don't forget to give them time for independent study and prep. Now, you should know the number of student hours in any one course. It's usually related to your credits. on the course, and you'll need to spread them out evenly. That makes the biggest difference of all to student retention and achievement, that it's viable in terms of hours and you're 100% clear what you expect them to do and when. So it'll get more and more messy. You're probably working together on this, and so you can move things around. You might have more than one activity in a week. Some might go over more than 1 week. Some weeks you might not have a synchronous activity, and so on. It's absolutely fine once you've got the basics in there to move it about. Now, these little numbers are the bit of magic. These are your student currency, and this will ensure that it's viable for students. So, for example, you think, okay, for that activity, they need about an hour. When you start, you have to estimate. Once you've run it once, you'll be able to ask students how long they spent on things. Probably about 3 hours for that workshop. That activity is going to go over 10 days, and it's a total of 5 hours split into different bits. Another one there. You get the idea, yeah? Yeah, okay. That really, the idea of student time as currency, that makes a big difference to how well your storyboard will work when it's built and delivered. Oh, I've got more, okay. That's what it looks like if you do it when you're co-located and you can see that people are working together. You'll need to do it a few times if you're collaborating to get it right. That's what it looks like. This is a Miro board that we use as well to do it digitally. That's one filled in. So you get the idea of that? So if you just remember this storyboarding idea and some of the features, I promise you that your plans will be more sustainable. And as I say, that's where you can find more about it. And then the last thing, when you've got it close to being built before you do your action plan, try and walk through it like a student. Imagine, or even get some students in to do the walking around and how that will actually go. And this whole thing about storyboarding was based on Disney and animation, right? If you look on YouTube, you can see the actual Walt Disney doing it with his team, and it looks so much like this. And they're all the characters, you know, so they walk around and say, well, what would he do now? Oh, no, this is going down the hole, and so on. Try and do that, except you be your students, all right? If you can't do it, get them in to do it. And then at this point, I'd say, okay, we're going to have some AI. We're going to have at least some experimentation in one or more of the activities in the style of future style. For DALI, this was style E2. I've not given you a chat GPT. It's a bit boring text, but you can do this, you know, with images and so on. I heard all the work about images going on this morning. So that's what I got. Futures for higher education in the style of DALI. And don't forget the metaverse and the virtual worlds, because there's even a 5-stage model for virtual worlds that was developed in Second Life. So, you know, they are very interactive and they can be accessible for some people. Now, I just want to tell you, yeah, I've got a couple of minutes. So imagine it's Saturday morning in Easter 2020, and I get a phone call from a colleague at the University of East Anglia. She's an occupational therapist, and she's in tears because everything was going into shutdown, and she had 30 students who were not going to complete their degree because the clinical placement was impossible. And she asked me whether I'd help her to design something which we ultimately called PEEP, Peer Enhanced E-Placements. This also links as well to all the websites. It worked super well. We managed to meet the professional body's learning outcomes. More students completed the assessments that had in the last few years going on location-based placements. and there was enhancement of certain aspects, particularly the peer working and the clinical reasoning, both of which were important. So we turned it into a model. We shared it with staff. We've done, lost count, hundreds of these over the pandemic period. And there's been a book recently published about it. If you're interested, it's on the website. And we've done hundreds of presentations, and we're still doing these workshops. And so we built it into a model a bit like the 5-stage model, so that colleagues in health, and it even is a point now in the UK where the professional bodies are changing their policy. So it's gone from action, that bit of emergency teaching, into them saying, okay, well, as long as you use this model, a quarter of your placements can be digital. So we're not trying to replace them all, but so it's gone across nursing, and we're just starting on medics now. It's gone across dentistry, veterinary, all the nurses, and the 14 allied health professionals. So I think it was using seminal models, the knowledge we had already, but put together in a particular way, digitalized so everyone had access to it. And it's just done its own thing and scaled up in what we think is an astonishing way. So I hope you found something out of that. Something that didn't annoy you too much, that you thought that you could maybe go away and do tomorrow. Can we have a vote? Did everyone get something? Something? Looks good. Yeah, I'll go with that. Thank you. Thanks for listening. It was actually done by me. I didn't use GPT, although I've acknowledged slide 34, which was future education in the style of Dali. But as I say, there's a lot of references for those of you who would like to follow up. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gilly. That was wonderful. We could take one or two questions while we're just
on any online questions.
It's an online question.
Online
and maybe if while we're waiting, if you could pull up just in the digital board that Esther is creating. She's creating our digital harvester today.
Do you know where
they might be able to do that live? Let me just say, you do it. Just I need to do it. Okay.
Any questions online?
Yes, we do have a question online. So Victoria is just talking about the SUSI grants in Ireland, and that there's a condition with these that they're that students have to be full-time and on campus. So what is being highlighted here is there is an issue accessing online postgraduate or blended courses for these students. So I think that in transforming the grant system has to move with technology and digital ed approach, as these students would be excluded from certain postgrad programs. And really, Victoria is just wondering, what is your opinion on how this can be achieved?
Is this working?
Just press the button on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What I heard of that was someone who's insisting on students attending campus. We've done quite a lot of design on that, but then you're going for blend, okay? And your synchronous part will be all your regular workshops and lectures and so on. I certainly recommend that they try and do some interactive work in class. But you're going more to kind of a flipped classroom model where they do things prior to coming to campus and then after coming to campus. And in that way, you would be able to meet the requirements and still have the benefits of a lot of, people use the activities for that. You'll see if you look at the activities, they often finish up, say, finish by Friday, and you'll get your feedback from me at the workshop or seminar.
Yeah.
So I hope you'll have a look at that. But if you can tell the person who asked the question to email me, I'm happy to talk to her some more about it.
Perfect. And there's one more question here, just while we're on the online ones. From Samantha, it's, hi Gilly, any models that you might recommend for digital work-based learning?
Right, the digital work-based learning, you just simply need to get your employers or your workplace in right at the beginning, ideally doing an image right at the very, very beginning. They don't necessarily need to be there for the storyboarding, but sorry, go on. It works just as well, but as I say, don't bring them in at the end. Bring them in right at the beginning. So I think it is really important to get that pinpoint vision of what must be in there and really what they need. And it's very motivating for students when they're studying the course to know that that's happened. Okay, is there anyone in the room? Yeah, over there.
You ready? You sure?
Okay.
Gilly, thank you. Just kind of a question in relation to the peer enhanced e-placements, the
Yes.
program. Was there an investment required in terms of lab space or simulation space?
No, there's no simulation. It's just using the virtual learning environment. During the pandemic, we used to have, remote patients, live patients. And in fact, the very first time we ran it, we had role play from staff being the patients because we couldn't get live patients even. But actually that has developed. So, and it depends on the profession. So for example, a lot of the allied health, like the dietitians, the podiatrists and so on, they take a clinical case history, and so it's done that way. But we've also done a lot, for example, with paramedics and others where we've done scenario-based. But we've not used any fancy technology. It's only the VLE.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Gilly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.